Well,
First of all, on tape, I want to welcome you.
thank you.
I didn't get to do that last time. You and Alpha Tree Productions, and of course, I really do want to express my appreciation for being considered a part of any project. But
Well, thank you for being so interesting
it's-
that I decided to expand this.
who knew?
Who knew? You always thought you would know.
I did want
That's
to,
why there's a 20-page description of your life here.
and that's a synopsis, okay?
Right? Yeah. When I first saw this, I had expected you to send me like a page, and you sent me 20, and I was like, okay, there's more to explore here. So.
I also performed that way. Never simple.
That's how it
Has
should
to
be.
be. I do want to clarify too in the beginning is that anything I share about my story is, of course, my opinion, my experience, my feelings. It's in no way meant to indict or disrespect or tell someone else their story is incorrect in any way, shape, or form. I think that's important because all in all, anyone who sees this tape has to do is either take something that strikes them as important and can be used, and if it doesn't, just pass it by, throw it out. It's this isn't about anyone else being right, wrong, or whatever. These are just my many years of going through life and finding out what works, what didn't, what I wouldn't want to do again, what I would, and if that helps someone else, that's the only reason it should be done, in my mind. So,
Well, that's what I'm hoping to get out of it too.
also, I'm old, and I think we should respect the fact that I probably could forget something, or something won't be in the right order, or some details may fall by the wayside. Just roll with it. It ain't deliberate. Okay,
Yeah.
hit me.
Well, Mother's Love again. Should we start with that?
I just want to make one disclaimer about what I spoke about before. Mom struggled with alcoholism, and but I didn't see the dramatic part of it until I was around 11 or 12, when my third brother was born. Somewhere along the line, it got really, really bad. And it ended up with her isolating in her bedroom, trying to detox herself all the time. And in so doing, I became the parent to the 3 kids. And that it was a good experience because I was already a neighborhood babysitter. But I became very fond of that, of loving those children and taking care of those duties. But I didn't quite equate it with Mom being a bad mother, a fallen down drunk. You know, I equated it with she was sick. And really, I didn't find out about it being alcohol for quite a while longer, when she maintained throughout her senior years sips of wine and sneaking it, and some behavior issues that she'd have, not disillusion, she'd see things that weren't there and call me and tell me the FBI is out on the porch ready to arrest her. Then I started suspecting the real drama, the effects of alcohol. And then she had long periods of not touching it. But the detoxing was horrendous. And she did go to treatment once, but she was put in at a time when treatment was accepting drug addicts as well, and she wasn't one of those. So she left 2 days after she got in and decided she'd take care of it on her own. So just wanted to clear that up. And the other point I wanted to clear up is that I told you an awful lot about the negative things that happened with my father and I as a youngster, and a little bit through adulthood, but it wasn't to demean him or to make him a demon. He grew up at a time in an alcoholic family, strict Victorian mother, a coal miner, deep underground miner, Pop, who drank a lot, was a rageaholic. And he learned all his parenting skills from them in that environment. And so did a whole lot of people back then who were in the war and came home, First and Second World War. And they brought all that with them. They were youngsters when they got married and had kids. So I can see some of the difficulty in that and why his behaviors would have been so sensitive on some days on negative. But there were character assets that were phenomenal. His loyalty to us, his ability to provide, his education, his extreme intellect, and he was an elegant speaker. He became an actor. He had tried out, and life stuff got in the way. Us, kids, and new marriage, and he was very successful and detailed at his job. He was always a civic servant, no matter where we lived. He was always the coach of one of the baseball or sports teams for youngsters. Many things. He and I just had this, I didn't cooperate. I wasn't the little boy he had hoped for, because I didn't know if I was a boy yet. Honestly, emotionally, I honestly didn't know what was going on. And I didn't know why I wasn't like my brother or the others. So I'm not demonizing him, but I don't think I'm unusual. The kids that grew up in the 50s and 60s had very similar parents to mine. And they weren't being mean or cruel. It was an era. Spanking was okay back then. Today you can go to jail for it.
And then this Vatican effect here.
We covered that.
Yeah, we kind of did, right?
But the next thing we didn't, and I think it's kind of cute, first grade. This is my first sex ed class. I'm in first grade. A little girl and I went into the cloakroom where we hung our coats and had our lunches stored. And she pulled down her panties, and showed me her private parts. I pulled down mine and showed her my private parts. And I proceeded to ask her where was her pee-pee. She said it fell off. We both went around the classroom searching for it. Okay? 1 year old. You know I wasn't going to be right from that moment on. I was absolutely shocked she didn't have one. I thought there was something wrong.
That's a cute story. We did talk about your first intro to show business and all that.
Did I tell you? Did we talk about the chorus line of women, the dancers, the group of women who danced in the minstrel shows?
I don't remember.
Our parish provided entertainment on certain holidays and feast days, and both high school and grade school had to represent, do a number in the show, some kind of production. Usually involved singing and dancing live, and we'd rehearse well, the parish men's club created a real live minstrel show that they put on annually, blackface and all, which was today would not go over, but it was quite professional. They brought in an outside director who did only these minstrel shows, rehearsed, so forth. It was my first time being backstage and experiencing a June Taylor Rockette type chorus girl and chorus line of performers. The young ladies were in those high-cut leotards, had the mesh hose with the seam up the back, high heels, gorgeous feathered headdresses and accessories. I was in second grade when I saw my first one. I was hooked. I went and saw them every show they did. Then they were hired to do the auto shows in Detroit, which are a very big, national big deal. And I went to every auto show to see them. I was mesmerized and addicted to that whole thing. It ended up previewing my own showbiz performing. That's what I wanted. And I had the same experience when I went to Vegas the first time as an adult. I was hooked. That's it. That's me. That's how I want to be in showbiz. So that's all we have to cover to finish that. And the impact of TV shows. TV had just been created. We had our first black and white television show, and the Milton Berle Show was the first show I ever saw, which was a variety show. I was particularly fond of all the variety shows. The children's shows, Jackie Gleason's show, and the June Taylor Dancers, the Ed Sullivan Show, the Walt Disney's Mickey Mouse Club. Oh, I was so hooked on that. I was going to be one, and I had love affairs with several of the Musketeers. And the serials that you didn't know the answer to until the following week, or the Batman and the Bowery Boys. Oh my God, that was so cool. Mighty Mouse. Loved Mighty Mouse. Was one of my favorite. Couldn't wait to get up Saturday morning and watch him. Howdy Doody, Soupy Sales. I am dating myself. So anyway, those shows were entertainment oriented. They weren't reality shows. They weren't the weather. They weren't even very busily commercialized. There wasn't a lot of commercials. You got to see most of the show. And then radio shows that were popular ended up becoming television shows, like The Shadow and Mama Knows Best, and it was absolutely incredible. I'd rather be doing that than playing baseball, football, even those kind of activities, which frustrated the hell out of my dad. And we used to have Friday night boxing. My dad wouldn't miss it. And,
I thought it was a knock at the door, I think.
And I hated it. Oh, yes, because I'm hooked. Just let Miss Pat in. Or it's the FedEx guy waiting for that box. Priest who molested me, and he thought he was in danger of being found out. I was asked to leave based on my grades. All the other priests came in and had a meeting, and anyway, they sent me home. When I got home, my parents were very supportive of me, but it was recommended I get psychiatric help. And the first person they turned me over to was my pastor, who was, I'm not going to sugarcoat, he was a son of a bitch. And his reaction to me being possibly a homosexual was that I'm forever damned, I have to get control of this. Everything negative about homosexuality to him was just abhorrent. And he would call me names, and he said, I'm going to send you to a psychiatrist that's going to beat it out of you. And one of our church members was a psychiatrist. He was an asshole from day one. He believed like the priest did. He had no tolerance for gay people in any way, shape, or form. It was a bad habit. It was unnatural. It was against God's law. And I had to be subjected to their therapy and counseling for a while. Honestly, this psychiatrist referred to me as a dog sitting in the corner, humping himself for gratification that was unnatural, and I'll never forget that sentence. I didn't know what to do with that. I really didn't at that time. And the pastor refused to let me go to sacraments until I stopped being a homo. So I couldn't go to communion, confession, any of the other sacraments. That's a real powerful decision that he made about the love and care and tolerance of my soul. If you're queer, you can't have any of the benefits of our religion. You know, you're an outcast. So that was very traumatic, and I hated the church and hated him. Actually, I still hate him, and he's long gone. Unfortunately, he was the best friend of my mother, so I could never go to my parents and tell them what was being said or how I was being handled. And one other time, I had a psychiatrist across from the hospital I worked at just shortly after I left the seminary. Did I tell you that? He was not a psychiatrist, and they arrested him a year later. I was in his care as a real live physician, and he was practicing on the patients across the street on the hospital. Had private practice. Later, there was a news article on him being found out he wasn't even a doctor, and I had hundreds of sessions with him. He never said one word. Never. He didn't say hello or goodbye. And he had a clock that rang when time was up. And he just sat here like this, didn't move, and when the time was up, you just left. And all you did was talk. It was horrendous. He was very damaging to me, too, at least trust issue-wise. Part of me wanted the help. I wanted to stop that pain, either of not knowing or of what to do with this subject of homosexuality. Very traumatic. Those were all very traumatic years, from the molestation to trying to get help, trying to rely on God, religion. My parents loved me through it all, though. They didn't know enough about it to intervene or be my advocate. But they figured everything was okay by the time I got involved with high school.
Speaking of high school, dating girls?
Oh, most uncomfortable thing I have ever had to do. I was looking for their pee-pee. That's what it was, and I didn't know that. Everything else about high school I loved, and I got to be. I was rejoining kids that I'd already gone to school with for 8 years previous, so it wasn't too hard to get back in. But I was a junior, and I had very poor grades both junior and senior year based on what happened to me previously. But fun and social-wise, I was the king of the hill, and very popular. I could cross cliques, and it was the same when I came out in gay life. I could cross cliques and have friends in every area. Junior prom, all those special events that required dates, I would do it. But I'm the guy that would not kiss the girl goodnight. And that got to be fodder for gossip. I'd have a wonderful time, and so would they. They loved going out with me because I was so much fun, and I was funny at that time. And they would brag about that. I wouldn't have trouble getting a date ever. I got to date some of the most popular young ladies that most guys didn't have the courage to ask. I was already their friends. But I was going out for friendship, they were going out for more. Same with senior prom, ring breakfast, Valentine dances, homecoming. I became senior class president. Loved that responsibility. And I was in drag in high school one time. We had a turnabout day. The football players went in drag for a pep rally, and the cheerleaders went as football players. And I am the one who created that entire thing. Of course I was. And the part I love the most is I got to slip into lipstick. Yeah, and blue eyeshadow. Remember that?
Oops, is that my hand on your dick?
Okay, this is the last high school tale. My very loving friends up there, the young man and I were I had friendships in junior and senior year with the jocks, the 3 or 4 most popular guys. One based on they were absolutely hunky. Secondly, I'd been in the locker rooms with them and loved them even more. And third, they were really nice guys who liked me. I always felt less than them, but their love and support for me as a friend was terrific. And the one young man, we went to the beach at my parents' cabin, and we slept overnight. During the night, I was having palpitations of desires. I wanted that man so bad I couldn't stand it. And he was wearing a Speedo. May I say on behalf of the Academy, he had track legs, okay? He was a runner. And we're in bed, and I'm inching closer and closer to him, but I have my back to him. And finally, we touch. I didn't do anything. That was enough. I was okay with just falling asleep that way. But he reached over and grabbed my hand and put it on his crotch and said that sentence, "Is this what you want?" And I froze. I almost went unconscious with absolute fear and terror. I remember it just like it was yesterday. I also wish I'd been who I am today then. He wouldn't have stood a chance. But because of that, nothing happened. I didn't do anything. I stayed silent and never talked to him about it. I never talked to him again for 30, 40 years. We've only recently become friends. We've been friends all along, but he could never understand why I stopped talking to him. So he was married right after high school. He had achievements and family, and I would attend all those things, but not talk to him. And it was a very sad, immature way to behave, but I was screwed up, emotionally screwed up when it came to relationships. I just switched him out for someone else. And I never did that again with any of them. I was too fearful. But I didn't know I was only 5, 6 years away from finding out I was gay and could come out, and there were other people like me. It didn't take long, for that to... but that was and only recently did I apologize to him for that. I went to my 50th class reunion. It was held at their home, and I was able to take him aside. I brought it up. He did. Something's bothering me. I didn't tell him why. He doesn't know I explained it. Well, he will if he sees this tape, but if you include it. But he absolutely loves me. Period. He doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. So does his wife. And in sobriety, I've been able to understand I needed to, first of all, apologize, make amends for that behavior, but also I had been ill, and secondly, so I could continue the friendship. We don't have a lot of time left. We're old people now, and I don't want that being sour. So it was a joyous reconciliation. They came and stopped here just a few months ago to spend the day with me. They were on a road trip visiting other friends and family. So, and every email always has something about you're my dearest soul, you're my dearest friend. So I really reaped the benefits of that one. That was really kind of cool.
Then there's this here, American Motors. Mark?
When I was lost in high school, when we graduated from high school. Absolutely lost. And I hadn't decided on college yet. Just a few weeks before colleges started, I went up to Grand Rapids, squeezed myself into the college, didn't have any money. But that period of waiting to go to college, and I only went because we were supposed to, hated it. Another Catholic college with severe Dominican priests and nuns. I'm already screwed up by Catholicism, and I go to a Catholic college too. What are you, crazy? Then I worked in a Catholic hospital. What are you, nuts? And I got a job. And first of all, I left college based on I was gay, didn't know what that meant. Went to a priest. I was feeling so guilty, having trouble dating girls, loved them, but I couldn't kiss them at night. And same theme as in high school. And this priest said, you need to go home and see a psychiatrist. The minute he said that, I quit college, went home, and got a job at American Motors through my father's contacts. My desk is next to the flamingest queen I have ever run into in my life, and I'm not even out yet, okay? And he perceives to understand that I am a queer who has not come out yet. And he's hell-bent on making sure I find my true calling. So I was pretty straight in behavior back then, and he introduced me, in order to stay my friend, he told me he was gay, and I was okay with that. He introduced me to his niece, and she and I began dating, and dating seriously, to the point where she was hoping I would ask her to marry her. But she was my date for fun, and I had just started drinking. I had my first drink of alcohol when I got a job. They took me out for my 21st birthday. I got drunk, went into a blackout, didn't return to work for 3 days, the very first week of employment. Do you think alcohol's an issue? Nah. So, Sandra, I became concerned because I was starting to have far more gay feelings and instincts, and George was making it harder to ignore. There were humor scenarios, there were places he was taking me that had gay people in that, and I was starting to be very curious and uncomfortable with my life as it was. As a result of him, I was able to meet a young man who, let's just say, gave me a taste sexually of the opportunities awaiting for me out in the bars, and then gave me directions to the first gay bar. Now, I hadn't broken up with Sandra yet, but I knew I had to, because that first night out at a gay bar I was home. I found where I belong. Much like when I got sober and fell into the 12-step fellowships. I was home. I knew I belonged. Then I had this issue of Sandra. One drunken night I decided to tell her I'm breaking up with her and that I'm a homosexual. It's Christmas Eve. Of course we'll pick the most dramatic holiday. And I bought her a puppy. I was covering all bases emotionally. And she had wanted one. But I got really, really drunk, went into a blackout, took the puppy in, screamed out I was queer, gave her the dog, and went out in my car and tried to kill myself. I had previously stuffed a towel in the muffler and closed all the windows. What I didn't know is I had a convertible it had a great big crack in the top that goes down. So it would have been a very long night of dying. And they got me out of the blackout, rescued me, went to the hospital, and about 2 weeks later I went and had a serious talk to her with her sober. And it wasn't a talk about me. It was a talk about she was not responsible. I really liked this young lady. If I had been straight, it would have been no issue to marry her. Cool. And today I hope she met a really cool dude and had a wonderful family. But she really was a neat young lady, and I was blessed at that point in time to have such a friend. And she was very tolerant about it. She didn't like it, but she was very tolerant, and finally the pieces came together for her. And I hope she got some peace after that. Then I went to the nightclubs. Met my first lay. That's all I can call him. He was a notorious head bartender at this mafia-run nightclub downtown Detroit. Worst part of Detroit you could have been in. Took me home to his apartment when it was over, and during our engagement there, in walks a third person who is his lover, I did not know about, and they wanted to have a threesome. And I did a soap opera, stand up, hands on hips huff. I don't do that, and stormed out of the house. Today I'd have stayed, but I missed several opportunities during the year. I was insulted that I was being treated like that. Shortly thereafter, I meet a hairdresser. He's about 9'7". I'm exaggerating. 6'3", 4". Nelly as can be. See, back then we called the feminine ones Nelly, and if you were straightish, you were butch. That had nothing to do with sex. It had everything to do with your behavior and your personality. I was butch. She was Nelly. We ended up going out. One night, we went out several times. I liked him, but I didn't like the Nelliness. I had a very big problem with the feminine, really feminine guys. And now I was in that whole circle. That was my first introduction, was this circle of really feminine guys. And that's not what I wanted, I think. So, but I still dated him. He was a nice kid. He took me, he asked me to come and pick him up one night. He answers the door and he's in full drag. Now that's my first drag queen, okay? And he made a not so respectable looking drag queen. He was just too masculine featured. And I was so shocked I almost passed out. But I drove him to this engagement that he was to be performing at, and I sat the entire night getting drunk, hostile that he was up on stage dressed as a woman. That really, really bothered me. When we went home, he sensed my mood and he said, I'll give up drag, you know, if you'll stay in my life. And I said, you don't have to do that. It's something you like. But I said, I really need to think about this. I said, I don't have a real good handle on what all this is about. It was very confusing. 4 weeks later, he put me in drag for the first time. And it was just a recreational sit at home, okay. And I'm not dating him, so he does it sort of resigned. And also sort of, I told you so. You know, that kind of, they had the knowledge, I didn't. I loved it. I was a cutie pie. And it wasn't much longer after that that I met my drag mother, Glenn. Oh, shouldn't say his name. She was absolutely stone gorgeous. Woman to the ends. He looked just like Barbara Eden, physically. As a matter of fact, that's who I thought it was who came into our nightclub and asked me to dance. What I didn't know was him, who I had now just become friends with, and he was straight-ish outside of drag. That was important to me at that time. I had a lot of judgment, you know, about that. I thought it had some sort of reflection on me. And I didn't realize that that's not what it was about. And he asked me to dance a slow dance. I was mesmerized. I didn't know it was a boy, let alone I didn't know it was him. And I couldn't understand why this beautiful, glamorous Barbara Eden had just asked me. I thought she was appearing at the Fisher Theater in Detroit. And stopped at a lot of the stars, Diana and Liza and all them, stopped in our bars, you know, when they were in town. And during that dance, he says, Mike. And I said, what? And she says, it's me, Glenn. I did not connect the dots with that voice to the information being passed to me, to the vision that was standing in front of me. So, there was this moment of absolute shock. Then there was a moment of awareness and that it was the truth. And then there was my jaw dropped. I couldn't catch my breath. He was so beautiful. I wanted to know how he did that. He impacted me in that moment in time that I had made the decision inside my heart. That's what I want to do. I didn't know you could do that and be a boy. So he did the art form the way I was brought up in it because of him. It's a theater job when you're in drag. It's a stage experience. And I maintained that right up until this day. And he's retired now. He lives up in Upper Michigan with his lover. But it's it's amazing how much impact. He freed me. He freed me. I knew what my channel was, and now it had nothing to do with my love life, but I was to find out it would. A lot of straight guys I dated, straightish, butch guys I dated, hated the drag part and wouldn't see me again if they found out. And that was not uncommon. Just like me dumping the hairdresser. Because of that, it had happened to me too. And it happened a lot during that era. Today, I'm absolutely shocked drag queens have lovers. Long relationship lovers. And I found that out when I went to Miss Gay America and was a judge. So times have changed. There's a respect for it. I think back then the straight guys, the butch guys, thought that was our identity, and it wasn't. It was a job. It was an entertainment job. So it's like if I was a tap dancer and was tap dancing, and they didn't like me because I tap dance in my head. So did that answer your? Did I cover that point? I'm not here. I'm back in '67.
Hospital breakup. Did you talk about that? Who doesn't love the California surfer dude?
Oh, after I met Glenn in drag, very shortly thereafter, I didn't get to do drag for an entire year because I met this young man from California who needed transportation back to California. I resigned my job, married him, and drove him back to California within a couple of days. He was absolutely gorgeous, surfer, handsome surfer dude. I just knew that meant he was a wonderful man. And back then, all I had was a visual, the picture of the individuals outside mattered more than me taking time and getting, and I always thought you had to have sex first before I would get to know somebody. So I made some pretty bad choices because there's a lot of really nice looking guys out there who are assholes, and I found that out the hard way. Anyway, this was one of those assholes, but he was stone gorgeous. If you're going to be with an asshole, be with a guy who looks like this, okay? I drove him out to California. We tried to live a partner life there. Didn't work. Very hostile. It was my first encounter with taking care of myself in a negative, abusive, aggressive way relationship. But I wasn't afraid of him. I didn't want to fight him, but I wasn't afraid of him. And I ended up forming a life out there. Went to work in a hospital ER department, and he went on and did something else. But then I got sick. He was my first love, and first investment of love that I know of. And when I was out in California, I got mononucleosis and could not get well. I'd go back to work and I'd get sick again. So I flew home to get better. Ended up taking a job when I got back here because my mother helped me heal, and ended up meeting my first true love. Now I haven't done drag yet on stage. That's still waiting in the wings. I was too busy running off getting married to handsome guys. And this young man became a relationship and was mutual, and he was a mature and very, very sweet young man. New to gay life too, so we kind of stumbled together through it. But I definitely was the one who was a drain. My neediness was just, no guy could have stood it. As mature as he was and as accomplished, he handled it in the beginning, but and then he broke up with me, and that's the first person that ever did that. And that was a horrendous experience. I didn't know how to handle it. I behaved pretty badly. But it did get me on stage my first time. And I think we talked about that the last time. The Gold Hour Show Bar Amateur Night on Mondays.
Yes. How did he get you on there exactly?
He had nothing to do with that. We'd been broken up, but my drag mother was booked to do the amateur show on Monday night and got me a gig. And the pros took the night off, and amateurs entertained. It was a straight bar that had drag shows, and was down by the wharfs. That's important because it was my first time performing, and I did Mary Wells as my guy. Absolutely loved it. Loved the response. Audience loved me right away, except him. He was there that night, and I didn't know it. And unbeknownst to him, my drag name was a combination of his first and second name.
Oh yeah, you did something.
Yeah, and he was really hostile about that. He stood up in the middle of one of my acts and said something very inappropriate. And you know what? I don't blame him. That was really kind of tacky of me. But the really significant thing about it was that, first of all, I got to do drag with spotlight and stage and a real audience. Secondly, I was asked to go home with a sailor and be paid. The head drag at this club, the professional, she was halfway through a transsexual experience herself, but she was hard. She carried a knife in her stockings here and a gun, a small gun all the time. Apparently she was the head of the drug ring and the prostitution ring. I didn't even know they had that then. But here I am in the middle of it, and a sailor who was very cute paid for my time for the rest of the evening when I wasn't performing. And I didn't know that. So he bought me drinks. Then it comes time to send me to go someplace with him, according to him. I said, well, no, I can't. I got to get work tomorrow. I got to blah, blah, blah. He complains to the head drag. She comes over to me and, in her broken Puerto Rican accent, nails me to the wall about my responsibilities as a hooker. I said, I'm not a hooker. I don't do that. And I was mad and sad because the sailor was cute. But her horror stories came out of that bar about that stuff, especially later. Some of the kids were taken out to there was a motel out back. I didn't know that. Talk about clueless from day one. And were murdered in that hotel, and really bad stuff happened. I quickly changed. I was afraid. I quickly changed out of drag, and I told Glenn what happened. We both got out of there, and I went back as an audience member, but I never performed there again. It also changed hands. It changed its drug hooker atmosphere, and later on, and that was but that was the beginning of the part of my gay life that was clueless. I was clueless about things until they happened. I found out more information as I was thrown into these experiences that I didn't know ahead of time might have been threatening, life-threatening, or same with that detective that tried to rape me in my car. I had no clue. I didn't connect the dots that was possible, as I'm leaving the club. So I got asked to take someone's place at a nightclub. I went by myself, which was stupid. And the drag queens in that club were real hostile to me. They never liked a newcomer coming in or someone younger. And I was prettier than they were. That counted in their eyes. And I was treated hostile by the head drag queen. They had these hostile mothers that took care of the whole crew. Nothing was done without their say-so. I was just a visitor filling a spot. So I did my job. They loved me. The cast softened up to me by the time, and they actually offered me a job. There was a security dude who turns out was also a Detroit police detective. He moonlighted at night, and he came up to me after the show. He bought me drinks during the show. And then he came up to me after the show and he said, as the bouncer, I'm supposed to walk each of you girls out to your car. And he picks up my suitcases and he walks me out to my car and then tries to molest me. And literally and aggressively. I ended up getting away from him. And it was a good thing because when I kicked him to the ground, he pulled out his gun to shoot me, and I jumped. I was already in my car, but the door was open, and I had the motor already on, thank God. He tried to get under my tights, my pencil skirt, and he tried to get in there, down there, through my pantyhose. And that's the year. Those were the years when we wore 6, 7 pantyhose. He'd have never gotten through. Okay. He's an ironclad steel worker. I drove off, and he never fired the gun. He was married, had children, wanted me to go home with him and do very explicit, sick things. I had no clue. I never appeared at that bar again. It didn't stay open very long either. It's right across from the Olympia Stadium, where the Red Wings hockey team is. So, you think I'd live and learn?
Well, you want to talk about the dark alleys, gang members, violence, police raids?
One tale will sum it all up. There were many, many clubs that these experiences happened at, but the attitude at that time was before the liberation of bars where gay owners opened nightclubs, and they opened them up in the suburbs. That's what changed the entire early 60s and 70s of gay bars, being in dirty back alley places run by the mafia. One of those places in the suburbs opened up. It's still, my hat's off to Gigi's nightclub. It's still open. It's in Michigan, up Traverse City way, I think. I started as one of their first bartenders, and then I became the first show director. I brought drag shows into Gigi's, and it still has drag shows today. We're talking, I was in my 20s. That's a long, long time. Even they don't know. It's all my people are gone and dead. The kids who have it now don't know who I am. So it's kind of a hoot. Or the owners. So they only have my word for it. But they had a motorcycle gang that was security for both. The lower bar was for us, the boys. The upper bar was for the girls. It was an old bowling alley. It had two bowling alleys. The head of the gang was Louis, and his assistant was Vodka. Vodka liked me. I became manager of the club at that time. Vodka liked me, and his girlfriend. Louis' girlfriend liked me, and we'd all sit around and drink before and after the nightclub. It was my job to take the deposits across the street, night banking, and both Louis and Vodka had to escort me each night. And then we'd go to breakfast. And they would beat up any man who said anything derogatory about me I'd be in the middle of scrambled eggs and pancakes. And someone would say faggot, and that's it. Just the blood was everywhere. And this one night I held a charity event. We were charging a little bit of money to get in the door. Louis let 3 or 4 people in without taking their money. Apparently they were friends of his. And I went up and confronted him. I was the manager. Louis was 9'7" if he was a day, 300 pounds, solid black leather coat to the earballs, and hostile. A member of their gang had been murdered, and they were hyping themselves up to go out and get revenge on the other gang. I did not know this. Clueless. Can't read motorcycle gang signs, And Louis picked me up by the throat when I confronted him. Picked me up by the throat and literally had me 5 feet off the ground and slammed me up against the cement wall of the nightclub. They also beat up some other gay kids who tried to get in the club that night, who got in and then ran downstairs screaming for all of us to help them not get hurt. And they were hurt. They were hurt badly. I quit the club that night. Now, I came back the next week because the owner swore that would never happen. Louis would apologize. That moment in time, I did not know what real evil and life-threatening a person capable of murder. It was so readable and so honest in his face and his eyes, especially the eyes. I will never forget that as long as I live. And what cocaine and these types of drugs do. That's who I'd have become if I'd started on that stuff. Now, I wouldn't have been violent, unless you were smaller than me. And again, it points out I was clueless, had to learn the hard way. They honored my resigning, and I continued to work there for quite a while. Excuse me. I gotta take a sip. So, where were we? Cinnamon's birth.
Yeah.
We did cover that. No, we covered safe escort. Drag life. Oh, the only thing I'm going to mention about that is I got to do drag, but not as a job. None of us were paid. We were bring up business on a Sunday night show. We were holiday shows, Halloween, Christmas, that type of stuff. But we were never paid. We were given a bar tab, which I abused. That was kind of the 70s and took place in the suburban bars. Now they had hired professional security people, but what you could not count on was when the police raids would happen, or when somebody would get arrested falsely, or in the bathroom be tricked by a undercover policeman. That stuff still went on, and we sort of just lived with it. We just knew it was part of the facts of being in a gay bar, period. Now that doesn't happen today much or at all, if I know. But they clamped down on us if there was any trouble with the owners paying their gifts to the cops, or if the cops had complaints from the public or the administration of a city, county, or state, then we would get clobbered, and it would blow over. But it was always scary to be handled by them, because they were not polite. We were in their eyes less than, and a lot of guys got hurt significantly, hospitalized. 90% of the times we were drunk and we'd fight them. That was the stupid thing, you know. Yeah, that was asking for getting clobbered in the head with a nightstick.
I'm assuming we're in the 80s here now. HIV, AIDS gossip, friends started dying.
Yeah, that started in the suburban bars. People were disappearing. Just literally disappearing. We'd see them one weekend and they were gone. Come to find out, there was this gossip about AIDS, or not HIV. It was all about AIDS, and that there was this gay cancer claiming the lives of people who were promiscuous, who didn't use protection. None of us took that seriously. Yes, we mourned the loss of a lot of them were my friends who had passed, but I had no idea they were unprotected people, and I didn't even have much information about the actual illness. But they started dying a little more frequently, and I moved. I left the city at that particular time. It followed our big Las Vegas show style of entertaining. That was a change in the drag world. We stopped doing stand-up drag, and we became big production shows. And we had it was a unique format for drag at that time. We could put together 2 90-minute shows, and we'd sell it to a nightclub or a bar. And that's when we started seeing some of our performer friends not make it. As a matter of fact, of all the chorus girls, there's only 2 of us alive today that could have gotten it. But see, I'd have progressed had I gotten it that soon. Thank God I didn't ever give it to my partner.
15, 16 years of not knowing? Wow.
It didn't involve me. We were invincible. I was young. I was invincible. I was also drunk and didn't give a shit.
What do you want to start with that? Alcoholic, geographical? Sure.
After the because of employment dissatisfaction, I decided to make a geographical change, and I ended up in Delaware. I had a girlfriend there who was gay, who worked for DuPont in a very high position. She was a chemist. She said I could come and live with her, give it a shot, give it a try. I was her date for all her family. Her family didn't know she was gay, so I was the guy that was her straight date all the time for family events. We became really good friends. And so I went out to Delaware, Wilmington, Delaware. I got a job at a brand new bar. Back then there were clubs that you had to join, memberships, to get in. That's how they screened. And heavy drug population there. I became manager of this club right away. I was hired. And then I started drag there. I just copied our shows from Michigan, used the kids there, and I started entertainment at this particular nightclub. And it became a big deal. I think it's still going on. But I was able to do pretty much the same thing I did gay-wise there as I did back home in Michigan. What happened is one night I was doing a show. I had a costume on, a really coarse, high-cut, short French cut chorus girl outfit on, and I was really I had a real nice figure back then, and I had a few weeks previous I had met a man that I helped join the club. He was recommended by one of my skating friends. I was hoping I'd see this guy again, and I didn't meet up with him, and he ended up at my drag show. And I was a little caught up with that, oh shit, he knows I'm in drag, he'll never date me. But I got a little just drunk enough to go up to him that night. He was with another date, who I really didn't like. I thought he had very poor taste. And I said to him, come up and see me sometime when the zipper's in the front. He did. I was shocked. One night he came into the club, I was bartending, doing whatever. We went out, we went to dinner in Philly, and he ended up being a 15-year long-term relationship. And it was because of him that I was able to finish my beauty school credits in Philadelphia. He owned a skating rink down in this area. And there came a time when our relationship was serious enough that I needed to live with him. And so I stopped my life there and came down and became, a part of his. And I didn't have a clue what I was getting into employment-wise, business-wise. He was a very kind, Father Flanagan kind of dude, very tolerant of, he would not react to any of my immaturities. And then I got such a respect for that, I stopped behaving like that with him. And we could talk intelligently about subject matter and so forth. So that was a complete change for me. And I finally felt like I had come home in gay life to a respectable affairs of the heart. In the skating rink, I took part as a part-time employee, part-time manager, and they had skating shows there for the kids who took classes. They were horrible. They were those beginner recital things you see on TV that you change the channel real quick. I was horrified by how awful these shows were, but the parents just loved it. I added a flair to it and created the first Las Vegas roller skating show with Walt. Walt was a very talented teacher and performer. He was an award-winning champion. I entered competition in the older division with a young lady. We were doing very well till one night I got drunk. During the break between competitions, we were holding first place. Then there was a break, so I had dinner and my 32 scotches, thinking I could go back and nail the first place. It was because of my being drunk that we lost completely. Walt was, my partner was very upset. That's the issue with alcoholism. It just tears your life apart. But starting these shows, our audiences grew because I put Las Vegas costuming in there. There'd be 150 people in the cast. We had a children's cast that was 100 people from all ages, from little tiny toddlers to teenagers. And we kept a lot of the teenagers busy. This was a very drug-infested area it was Edgewood. And the drug capital of this area, and kids would be outside and we would monitor our parking lots on Friday and Saturday night and try and keep them in the building, and we were also babysitting the kids while the parents were out getting drunk. So we formed a huge attachment, and they with us, with all the skaters and the families. It was a wonderful 15 years of really great people. But anyway, our show became so well known, so good, we rivaled the ice show. And Channel 13 came out, and a Philadelphia station came out and did a show based on us, Evening Magazine, and advertised the show. We ended up in the Towson Center with a partner from Metro Media. They were the money dudes. They were going to help us go on the road. No, it wasn't Metro. It was another backer. And then we ended up at the Baltimore Civic Center downtown for an engagement for a weekend. Fairly well attended, but our advertising budget was kerschmuckin'. And I had spent $10,000 of the money, the advertising money, on feathers. I was in feather heaven, I have to tell you. There wasn't a color I didn't have in the apartment. After the Civic Center show, we got invited to do the Ocean Fest, Sun Fest, down in Ocean City, Maryland, at their Civic Center. Disco was popular. We were in nightclubs doing skating with smaller cast. We were really sailing along. And then we get a call from New York, from Los Angeles, from Hollywood, from Metro Media, a big conglomerate that owned the circuses, Ringling Brothers, the ice shows, Holiday on Ice, Ice Capades, that whole entertainment group Irving and Kenneth Feld owned. They wanted to come out and see us and talk about a show, putting us on the road. It turned out that's not why they contacted us. They asked us to give them tapes of our show. And they toured our facility and saw all of our stuff, and they said they'd be in touch with us. And they took our tapes and left. Well, so first of all, it was only the tapes we had. They were the professional tapes from the television station. Secondly, we don't hear anything from them for months. And then And we have a lot of gay kids in our cast. A lot of gay guys were in our cast, and we had a really large gay circle of friends because of this skating rink. And we get a letter with 100-some tickets for us to see the ice show down in Baltimore. We were all really excited. We thought that was very thoughtful of them to do. We got down there, and our skating show appeared the entire night. Every single act had been duplicated. Costumes, music, choreography. We sat there. Walt and I we just kind of like, we didn't know what to do with that information, that experience. And the guy that owned it, Kenneth Feld, the son, came up and greeted us and welcomed us before it all started, kind of with an attitude of, ha ha, we gotcha, screw ya. I didn't pick up on that until after we saw the show. And my costume director came over to us and she said, am I crazy or is that our show? And I said, you're not crazy. There was nothing we could do about that. And the whole thing folded. Hundreds of families were devastated. Everyone was on board. The parents were our technicians, our set builders, our costume constructors. We bought a floor. We bought an old tennis court floor from a university in Arkansas or something, portable. And we would take that wherever we were doing a show. That thing was $11,000 used. And that came out of Walt's and my bank account. Very disturbing, distressful, sad, betrayed time of life. Now during that time, I was very active in bar life. I was starting to cheat on Walter, unfortunately. I always thought he was sneaking around on me, but instead of sitting down and having a mature conversation about it, and baths opened up in Baltimore at that time, and I started, frequenting them. I didn't let my duties fall down at all at the rink, but I made sure I had my time, my fun time. That's important only because that became the way I operated from that moment on until I got sober. And it was all booze induced, and our lease was up on the rink 15 years later. The owners would not sell the building to Walt and I because we were gay. They were hardcore Jehovah's Witnesses. And instead, they sold the property to a shopping center. And it's now a full-blown shopping center. We got a lease to rent a rink in California from a friend of Walt's who had 9 rinks, and one of them had become vacant for lease. We took that. And our whole lives changed, and the lives of all the families, and an era ended. And we had raised a lot of champions. We had raised skaters that ended up at the Pan Am Games. We were almost in the Olympics one of these years. And it was a very big deal, a very huge part of our lives. And we ended up in the high deserts in California. I continued to go to the bars. It was there that I saw my first AIDS sign at the gay bars in Los Angeles and in the baths. The huge posters about protecting yourself. They were cute. They were cartoony things, because I'd been married that long and we weren't out in the bars all that much, AIDS and HIV didn't ring true for me.
Hang on, I think there's one.
Someone?
FedEx.
Oh, you used that's yours? Okay.
No, the one that's in there is the one you gave me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we're good.
Good. All right.
So we're in California, right?
Yeah. We saw the 8 signs.
And it was more in your face, obviously, because California was hit so hard, San Francisco and New York, with the actual pandemic. And we started to hear those kinds of words, and that started to pick up I started getting more interested in that, and it sounded to be dangerous to be doing what I was doing. But I'd get drunk, and all those thoughts would disappear, and I would become that guy who had unprotected, promiscuous behaviors. Now we're only talking a few more years out before I got sober, so we're that close to all of that ending. But we were also exposed to hatred of gays up in when someone found out we were gay up in that high desert community. It was very Christian. We'd not experienced that before. We had come from a completely accepting environment to a little stricter. So we behaved more. We didn't include as many people in our personal lives like we were able to in Baltimore. And one night I got drunk and I was caught with a DUI. It was my first. Now here we are, community businessmen whose responsibility is taking care of children, I mean literally, and one of the owners hits the newspapers as getting a DUI. That was very, very difficult, but we got a good lawyer. She was one of our skaters. Of course, I had to pay a fine, and I got a slap on the wrist. But what happened to me inside was I was horrified by that. I will never do that again, I swear. Okay? DWI number 2 happened when we gave up the rink after 3 years. Skating business was going downhill. Okay? We bought a building that used to be a fur store. It was gorgeous. We turned it into a French, 100-seat American and French restaurant. Now, I'm the only one who had food service experience. But I was never a chef. I was never the procurer. I was never the money man, the capital guy. But I knew how to decorate the place. And we created a beautiful restaurant. But the day we went to open, we had no money left. Walt had taken out a loan on his farm back home in Maryland. We used every penny to refurb this building to be up to code and licensing and so forth. Kitchen equipment alone, freezers, stoves, horrendous expenses. We had no idea. We were clueless. And then we hired a young lady from back here who used to work for the Hyatt, starting and staffing restaurants. It was my job to stock the bar and to hire the bartenders. And then sometimes I would, the manager had every right to be behind the bar. It was my favorite place. And one night I got drunk and I was driving. I went out to the gay bar that night, got drunk. Was sitting in my car and the policeman saw me in my car and they wanted to arrest me because they smelled booze. They wanted me to get out and take the sobriety test. The owners of the bar came out and some of the clients, and they were trying to vouch for me. I wouldn't say anything. I was stone silent. I wouldn't give them my license. I wouldn't tell them my name. I didn't know, but I'd gone into a blackout, and I was sitting there really clueless that I was in trouble. They pulled me out of the car. They hit me. They put their knee in my gut, and I said, "Why'd you do that?" And off they haul me to the emergency room, in which they proceed to beat me again outside the emergency room. And then they took me inside and did a breathalyzer, and took blood. And of course, my my booze count was horrendous. And I ended up in court. I ended up in jail, and in the newspapers again. I swear on my mother's Bible, I will never do this again. Okay? Becoming restaurant owners was the stupidest thing Walt and I have ever done in our lives. When we ran out of money, we took on a partner that we shouldn't have. It ended up, she was a notorious businesswoman with no ethics. She got 51% of the restaurant based on giving us $15,000. We needed $150,000, but she gave us 15. She got 51% of the restaurant. Walter got 49. I got none. So I was pushed out. She didn't like me personally. She was secretly in love with Walt. She didn't know we were gay yet. I would speak up and be aggressive with her. I would confront her with her faults when it came to running the restaurant, based on my experience. Or advocating for the help that would come to me and say, you know what she's doing now? I'm supposed to have that table. And I'm the guy that would go over. Well, she wouldn't have any of that. I was thrown out. She threatened to have her sons come and beat me up. And then one night she pulled a Derringer on me and was going to shoot me. In the middle of the restaurant while we're serving dinner. She was not. And then someone told her we were gay. That did it. She had to get us both out of there. And she brought in a man to buy the restaurant. She got rid of us. We were going to be in legal hot water based on her stories about us. And my accountant told me we better get out of town and never come back. And that's how we ended up back here in Maryland. Now, I've already had 2 DWIs. I've been bar hopping. I've been going down to Los Angeles. I've been and to the baths and to bars, and I'm seeing the AIDS epidemic, but it still isn't touching my life at this point in time. And we went home and penniless back to Maryland. Walt's farm we lived at for a while. It had no heat, no electricity. We had to get jobs in order to have that stuff turned back on. And it was a very difficult time in our relationship. I think he blamed me. I blamed. He never backed me up with her. He really was pussy whipped by her in many, many ways. He didn't want to cause trouble, even though he was standing up for his own rights. And I had no respect for the fact that he didn't try to support me. And he also always thought she had been right, that I was to blame for these incidents that would get her and I, her feathers ruffled, because she would lie to him, and he never asked me for the truth. Anyway, I got us out of town, packed us up and got us out of town. He was having a nervous breakdown at that time, and when we got here, I got a job right away hairdressing. I started to go to the bars and the baths to console myself. I started seeing guys more than just in the bars. I had 3 or 4 kind of boyfriends for a while there, but he and I had not sat down and talked about us. And he ended up working and having to go out of town. He had to go to New Jersey all week long, and that kept him. We were quite separated. And it was around then that we my brother opened a beauty shop for me right here in Bel Air. And we converted a house, rented a house, and converted it into a very nice salon. The only problem with that was we didn't include Walt, didn't tell him about it. He should have been told, and then I moved there to live. And he should have been living there with me, and that became a point of resentment for Walt, obviously. In between that time, I had hired all alcoholics and drug addicts because I'm still drinking, and I'm getting near the end of my alcoholism. I'm almost to my bottom, and I was comfortable having an all partying kind of staff. Of course, it didn't do any good for making money for the beauty salon because people knew. They were going in the bathroom and coking up. And I didn't do that, but you know, a lot of nights I didn't come home. A lot of mornings I wasn't at my chair, hungover, and but I lived downstairs. I had an apartment downstairs in the basement. Then I got my third DWI. I partied, ran down to Baltimore. That night I did not have any plans of getting in trouble, of getting a DUI, of blacking out or any of that. I was going out for my normal, well-deserved, long week, hard week of work rewards. And I went to the Hippo and a couple other clubs. Blacked out. I was blacking out more often. That was getting worse. And I ended up going the wrong way down St. Paul, which is a one-way street. And I was going the other way. And I ran into a police car, a canine unit. The dog told me to put my hands on the roof, which I did. And I was coming in and out of a blackout at the time. And then I had a moment of clarity, and it literally is the miracle, the absolute miracle of my life. I had a moment of clarity. I was sober as a judge for 3 minutes maybe. Whatever I'd been doing to this point in time was done. I was done. Whatever done meant. It was over, whatever it was. I was to find out, you know, what later, but I had become totally convinced, soul-wise, emotionally, intellectually, I was finished. And I found out in a few days what all that would mean. The police officer took me to jail, was in recovery from alcoholism himself. He recognized that I had an issue, and he asked me in my jail cell, in and out of blackouts, he said, "Do you think if you hadn't been drinking, you'd be in this trouble?" And he left. He stayed with me all night because I got very ill. He went past his own shift to stay with me, and in the morning I had kind of forgotten what he said, but he walked me into the court clerk, and the court clerk hands me the 20 questions of Alcoholics Anonymous that describes what an alcoholic is. If you answer all 20 of these questions, if you answer 3 of the questions, you're an alcoholic. I answered them all. I was 100% alcoholic. And I stood there looking at the paper, and she said to me, "Mr. Burke, do you know what that means?" I said, it says I'm an alcoholic. Now, I knew I was a drunk. I knew I drank too much, but I don't think I was as bad as the definition of alcoholism. And I was immediately assigned to TRW, Together Recovery Works, here in Bel Air, out this way, where they did my intake. And when I finished with my intake, the young man said to me, "Mr. Burke, we recommend inpatient treatment for you, long inpatient treatment." And I remembered the night that I thought the jig was up, and I connected it to his attitude about he knew something I didn't about the seriousness of alcoholism. And I said, "Well, you know, I think that's kind of extreme. I'll be glad to go to day classes, and, you know, I can go home and see if I have insurance." And he said, "Mr. Berg, we don't want you to see another night out. You may die." And that connected with the other 2 messages. So I went home, I found out I had insurance, and I actually went back and told him the truth. I had an opportunity to get out of it by saying I have no insurance. Within 3 or 4 days, I was in Shepherd Pratt Addictions Recovery Hospital.
What
And
year was it?
December 16th of 1986. I was in there for 30 days, got out on January 16th. And I found out the truth. I went in there with a lot of fear because I didn't know much. Again, I was clueless. That seems to happen to me a lot throughout my life. But I had this gift of grace that made me at least willing to listen to what was available there. And then I was thrown in with people that I recognized were just like me. They felt like I did, they behaved like I did, and they came from all walks of life. And I didn't sit there and say, well, he's worse than I am, he does cocaine. You know, it was, I'm one of them. And throughout the education process, throughout the recovery process of taking me to 12-step fellowships, and the importance of the ongoing principles in those programs, and the medical well-being, I was monitored. I believe they knew I was HIV, but they didn't tell me. Based on, I was the kind of guy that would use that as an excuse to relapse. And I was doing so well, and I was so connected. And I got along really well at 12-step meetings. I belonged there. I was convinced. And I also found the God of my understanding there, which is a huge piece of the recovery puzzle, based on the kind of living I was doing up to that point in time. That selfish, you can't tell me what to do, arrogant, self-destruct, you come first at all cost, a drink comes first at all cost, denial, it isn't as bad. If I drink tonight, the same thing won't happen that happened last night. Yeah, it will. You know, I had all that sickness in the personality and the mind and the emotions of an alcoholic. That was 27 years of drinking. So I was on my way, and I was to be discharged, and I heard that they had gossiped about with each other about whether to tell me I was HIV or not. I would not have been surprised. But I kind of like the fact they protected me. I don't think you should do that ethically, you know, medically or ethically to everyone, but for me, I think it was enough to face recovery, and that kind of change that was going to happen to my life. I get out of treatment. I realize I can no longer be the manager of my brother's salon, because I've hired all drunks and addicts. I no longer do that. I don't fit in. I can't stand their behaviors. I'm getting mad because they're behaving like addicts. They all knew I was in recovery, so they were avoiding me. It just got real bad. And then my brother ran out of money. He didn't. We didn't open it up with enough capital, and he didn't feel it was worth getting more money for it, which was a smart decision. We lost the beauty shop, and I ended up working local beauty shops around here, and I was more safe. I chose salons that were kind of not known for their addiction and drinking. So
during all this, there was no drag?
No drag. When was the last time I dragged? I did just before I got sober, I did drag on Miss Maryland pageant, and I placed like fourth or fifth out of 12. But that night I went into a blackout. I had gotten made up at someone's house right downtown just because of the drinking. And I could walk from Hippo to their home and be safe and not drive and get that fourth DWI. And I went into a blackout, and I have very little clothing on in this walk in the streets. I'm dressed like one of the June Taylor or Dancers or the Rockettes, and I'm walking full-blown right on down Charles Street to get to this house. Anything could have happened. I had no clue. I didn't even know basically what was happening. Anyway, I got safely to their house and had a horrible hangover. And then somewhere along there, I had the third DWI, and that changed the drag picture. Excuse me. When did I? in order to save my social butt, my desire, after I stopped drinking, I still had a desire to frequent the club. So I thought I could do that without drinking. I'll just drink Coke. My mind was telling me a vicarious thrill from a bar will be enough. I won't drink. I swear I won't drink. And I went one night. I told my sponsor I was going to. She said, you know, it ain't a good idea. But if you're going to go to a meeting first, a 12-step meeting first. Have fun at the bar, and then go to a 12-step meeting after you leave. And see how you're feeling. If it's bothering you, leave. Don't stay long enough to be so bothered a drink will be a choice. I thought, okay, I can do that. I went to a 12-step meeting down Baltimore. Across the street was the bar. Went over to the bar. I was in there maybe 15 minutes. And I saw 3 guys I used to drink with, who, we were sloppy drunks by then. They were in blackouts already. I saw the bar through sober eyes, physically. It was a horrible bar. I used to think it was one of the nicest clubs in Baltimore. Physically, the place reeked. I couldn't walk through the crowd like I used to. I was bumping into people because I wasn't in the drunk sway. The room has a sway when you're drinking. You kind of all move in the same direction. And I was accidentally bumping into people, and people were being obnoxious, and I saw this one guy, so drunk his pants were down. And he was a nice young friend of mine, and he passed away from AIDS later. And I said, this isn't for me. I don't belong here. I can't believe I had an intelligent connecting of dots and then made a conclusion. I did not do that on my own. That could have been the worst Russian roulette I've ever played. But it didn't turn out that way. It was as much of a miracle as the other events leading up to it. And I just blame God for it. I just figure, when He wants you sober, you're sober. You're struck. I was struck sober. So I changed jobs. I changed going to the bars. I had no life, no social life. And I had not dated to this day. 27 years, I've never had a date or a relationship. I chose to avoid the bars for a while, very long while, and a lot of gay events that I didn't fit in at if they were drinking oriented. I just didn't trust me. I trusted God and the fellowships, but not me. And I chose to start volunteering for HIV causes, AIDS causes. I joined. I helped with HERO, which was a HIV patient resource center down LBT building. I actually started training caretakers. I had 4 patients of my own that I actually took care of who lived out here, and I would take them to their appointments. And it was very gratifying. I made a couple of quilts, patches for the quilt, the AIDS quilt, of boys that I'd cared for who'd passed. I made them for their families, and got very involved in that. I joined square dancing group, except that was all married people, and that bothered me. I felt like the odd guy out. I started doing things that had a little more meaning, and I got my dogs at that time, not these 2, but the original 2. I started helping in the halfway centers, the treatment centers. They would call me to come and talk to usually the gay patients. They'd be in a straight population, they'd be the only person gay, and they would call me, and I would go and sit and chit-chat about recovery with people. I won an award for being a volunteer. 10 of us were chosen out of Baltimore. It was called the TV Channel 13 Time to Care Award, and they were passing those out for people who did exemplary volunteering for the community. And that was a big honor and neat photograph. There it is. With Donna Hamilton and what's his face? He was gorgeous. Steve Kometko. And then I, right after that, what did I do? I went to Japan. Forgot about that. I was chosen out of the entire state of Maryland to represent us at the, I forget what year it was, every 2 years they held an AIDS conference somewhere in the world, and this time it was Japan. I have always wanted to go to Japan, but I was already symptomizing and feeling sick. I didn't know I was HIV yet, but I was already feeling poorly, and like I had the flu 24/7. And it was a very arduous, I was sick all the time. Flying there was 17 hours of flying. I almost died on the plane. It was just too much for me physically. But I didn't know that yet. I didn't have a clue. I had to learn the hard way. And the 12 days that we were there, we were put up in first class hotels, food, the whole bit. They gave us $7,000 in cash to spend while we were there. And you had to prove that you were going to do something with your experience when you got back home. And of course I had my brother, who was a television anchor guy at that time in DC. So that got me, that was a plus for me getting the ability to go. And I spent, except for a few days of sightseeing, I spent most of the conference in bed. When I got to conferences, it turned out they were not patient-friendly. They weren't non-scientific friendly. It really was for the chemists, the doctors, the scientists, the money people, the big corporations, the pharmaceutical companies. We had no business being there. Nothing was given or shown to us as a takeaway. And all the facts and figures and statistics were too hard I didn't understand them. And when I came back, I had to report that. It did not go over big. But I had to report what I knew. So, and yet I'm really glad I got to go, personally. And I met the 10 guys, I was with however many states there were at that time, 50 states, I was with those 50 guys, and it was an honor. And some of them were on stretchers. Some of them were that sick, full-blown AIDS, on stretchers going to this event. And it wasn't for them. I thought it was a crime. It was a big show, a big political show-all. Yeah, if we're going to spend this money to have a conference, we should send some AIDS patients, you know. And I met the Emperor of Japan. They had to teach me how to bow to him. All 50 of us did. And we had breakfast with all the higher-ups at NIH, the National Institute of Health. So that's how they greased the wheels for their money side of it, using the money well. When I came back from that, I don't think I checked out. No, I didn't. I got involved in pageant judging, which put me back in nightclubs. But it put me back in nightclubs for a reason. I had a job to do. When it was over, I went home. And I'd always go to a 12-step fellowship meeting before I would go to any of my obligations. It was wonderful. First of all, I became judge worthy for the real Miss America in Atlantic City pageant for prelims. And I judged several of those. Because of that, I had a resume that when I applied for the Miss Gay America pageant judging on a national level, I was accepted. I went to my first, in 1996, crowning of Miss Gay America. It's a 6-day event, and the kids, 60 to 90 some kids competed for 3 or 4 categories. It was during this time, I'm sober, I'm feeling a little better, but ragged, and it was high fun. And it was in an area that I loved, that I was deeply connected to. And my takeaway from it was I could not believe this was drag. This was total art form. This was not D-R-A-G. These kids were so talented. First of all, I was blown away during male interview. They were very nice looking, groomed, beautiful suits. They're applying for a job for a year, and they can make a fortune as the crowned individual. And it was during male interview that I thought, I don't believe this. And most of them were still guys outside of, excuse me, outside of drag. And a lot of them had lovers. I couldn't even get over that. Then they had preliminaries for swim talent, gown. At that time, they had sportswear. They don't now. I couldn't believe what I was seeing artistic. It was a visual heaven. It's like if I had been a dressmaker and I had gone to France to one of the most beautiful modeling shows, one of the biggies, and experienced that for myself. That's what I was seeing here. And I was it was like I was reconverted to the kind of drag that's done today. And I didn't think much about whether I could be that guy, but I didn't care. I really respected and loved what was going on and loved these kids. It was very hard to pick the winner. But I enjoyed that, and then I was asked to judge male contests, the Mr. Gay America, Mr. USA of Gay America. There's another one, Leather, somebody. That's a night I'll never forget. A visual night I'll never forget. I'm not into that, and I didn't know much about it, but there's an element of surprise in everything the Leather kids do. Hoy! But some of it made me nervous, and some of it made me, my nipples got hard. Okay, so you'll have to edit that out, I'm sure. See, I'm finding out new things about me and my likes and dislikes. Lord.
Perfect.
When I got home from those drag shows, I had to do theater. I had to do it. I had to do something. And I ended up being one of 4 people who started recovery talent shows. And they'd been done before, but not on the scale I had done it. Usually it was just amateur night. Someone gets up, plays a guitar, and sings a song, writes a poem, and recites it. Our show was the full Michigan, Las Vegas review production. And we had star 12-step fellowship people as MCs. We had families, newcomers. The biggest joy of the entire doing those sobriety shows was newcomers stayed sober. They had a better chance of staying sober by investing all those months into the show. Now, whether they stayed that way afterwards didn't matter, but it was a joy watching a new person think, oh my God, you can have fun without booze. You can have fun without the needle. And none of us were very good. I'm one other guy and myself were the only pros, had pro backgrounds. That was even a great joy to share, to take people who all they had to do was just say, yeah, I'm interested, and turn them into, even if they were bad, they belonged and never stuck out. Well, they stuck out to me. It drove me crazy. But I'm not well. But my level of expectations for them pushed them beyond their limits and beyond their saying no to themselves. They can't do it, or they won't look good, or they... and I dared them in a way to... we had 10 showgirls of varying sizes, dancing chorus girls of varying shapes, sizes, and ages, who did a remarkable number. And I got them to say yes to leotards, French cut leotards, the hose, the higher shoes, the big, and the Vegas look took away their insecurities about they were out there practically naked. Wearing a big headdress and feathers and so forth added to the look, and it could cancel your own negativism and judgmentalism of your body or your self-image. Now, that didn't take away the fear. You had to actually do a show to help with that. And they supported each other. There was things going on that went way beyond show business. Now, in professional showbiz, it goes on. These kids were as professional as they could be without training. And the interest, the commitment, the solid commitment, and the respect and backing of me was incredible. It was something more fulfilling than anything I'd done up to that point other than get sober. And here it was all happening with people who weren't drinking. Not a drink or a drug, in all various stages of sober time, from new to 30 years. I knew we had, the way the audience reacted, we had 1,000 people in a high school auditorium. I have it on, well, you saw it on tape, or you have the ability to see it on tape. Their response did it. We knew we had something. And it ran for 15 to 17 more years. In various forms, various sizes. It became a non-fellowship, a non-sobriety show in the sense of 12-step fellowships. We formed an organization called Recovery Friends Care. That gave us permission to not have to protect our anonymity, and we could take our show to nightclubs or to wherever. And we ended up being used for Alcoholism Week in Wilmington, Delaware. We performed at their really prestigious theater up in Willow Valley Convention Center, up in a marvelous theater, old Broadway theater in Shrewsbury. I can't think of the city.
Westminster.
Who?
Westminster?
No.
Oh, it was
You go there for farm produce and, well, it doesn't matter. Anyway, we were used beyond the sobriety show. So we were doing 3 or 4 shows before the year was up. And then it was time to do the next sobriety show and come up with new gimmicks, ideas, costumes. The budgets were quite large back then, so we had to finally start tapering down on that. But I ended up being the show director, production director, not the event director, choreographer, costumer, headpieces, taught them makeup, but 100% every area, because I'm the only one who had the experience. And it was a joy to have that, to present that to them. When I started not feeling well, it became a pain in the ass labor. And changed my attitudes a whole bunch. Even then, no matter what kind of health trouble I was in, everybody meshed with me on that level, without judgment and cruelty, or they might be angry at my behavior and my personality at a given moment in time, but the product was still the same, and it was because of them. And then I started failing in being able to provide my part of the commitment over a period of time. We're talking quite a while. It was just previous to my cancer. I was starting to feel really bad, and began the decline of my involvement in sobriety shows. That first show we did in that high school auditorium was the first night I'd performed in drag. It was the first time I'd performed since that Miss Maryland pageant. We're talking 2 years, 3 years. I hadn't been in drag. I was choreographing the opening number for a lady. And she, but the cast never saw her yet. I kept saying she'll be coming in like a few weeks before because she's professional. And all along it was me, and they didn't know it. What was fun about that was all of our men were very what is it when they don't like us?
Homophobic.
Homophobic. I mean, here I am assuming you are, you know. And the weekend before the show, a couple of weeks before the actual show, they need a body to perform these lifts and what would be my part. So I went in the back room, ran them through the show. I went in the back room and changed into drag except my face. Matter of fact, we have pictures of me with a full mustache, and everywhere else I'm in drag. Cleavage to here, and you couldn't find a hair down here, okay? And when I came out from behind where I had changed, every man in that place went to that end of the building. The girls ran around me. The men were down there. It shook them up so bad, and they knew I was gay. But they had the same reaction I did when I saw my first really good drag queen. And rehearsals went very, very well when we got in the number, but getting them to come on back up and start participating was a real psychological, emotional challenge for them. And I had to assure them it's still me. This is just a costume. I'm a performer on stage and an entertainer in my costume. I said, think of me as Yogi Bear, okay? And they came up, and then everything went wonderful. Then they supported me. They loved it. And then the actual show, when I put my face on, I had a security guard fall in love with me and ask for my phone number. A high school security guard. He liked my cleavage, so.
So you're starting to feel poorly. Even more poorly.
In 2000, I felt a lump. I went to my doctor and he told me to see he described a tumor. He told me to go see an oncologist. I went to an oncologist. My sponsor took me to that. And this was one of the most renowned oncologists in the state of Maryland, an older gentleman. And he said to me, I didn't think it was very funny, but, and I was mad at my sponsor because she laughed. But he said to me, we're going to burn your ass and poison your body. That was his answer to, he knows my diagnosis. And he used a very cruel way to measure the tumor. Physically cruel way. I didn't have the wherewithal to complain about that, but I should have, because no oncologist did that other than him that way. And I had two oncologists actually apologize to me that man had done this, and he's renowned. Just that didn't start things off. Immediately I had the attitude, I will not seek any treatment for this. I was in the Louise Hayes phase about HIV and AIDS. She was writing all these books that supported alternative thinking and exercises and emotional take charge of you, and eat a banana and you won't get freckles. My thought was, I have the cancer. The cancer's my friend. It's here to teach me a lesson. Let it. Well, I had medical people saying I was absolutely nuts because it could kill me. And I thought, no, it can't. It ended up I had the same attitude about HIV and AIDS when I discovered that.
You didn't know that yet.
Oh wait, I did know that because that's why it was happening. Yeah, I had been tested, found out I was HIV. It was during the shows, and a few years later, and I wouldn't take AZT. It was the only thing available. I thought, leave it alone until they come along with stuff that isn't so harsh. I watched my boys die when I was patient caring them on AZT. They died from symptoms that weren't an AIDS disease. They died from other things, damage from the toxic AZT by itself. It was horrendous. Later they used it in combo, and that was a different. It had the killing power to destroy the HIV cells. And after I found that out, then I had this lump, and I saw the oncologist, and the one doctor said to me, you know, you're full-blown AIDS. And I didn't believe him. Truly didn't believe that was the case. It was separate. Cancer's separate. So I'm not seeking treatment. Then it starts to hurt, and it starts to bleed, and it's gotten bigger. And I went, I did follow-up care. They put me in the hospital and began chemo and radiation, very aggressive treatments. They got the tumor. I was given a certificate of graduation when the tumor was blown out of my body, and but I had no immune system, and I was on death's door. I did not know this because they had been giving me morphine patches. I like morphine patches, okay? So I didn't have a lot of clarity of thought. I couldn't connect dots. But I remember being in the hospital thinking, I don't feel good. I can hardly lift my own head off the pillow. I looked out the window one Sunday morning, just before I went home, and I said, you know, if you don't leave tomorrow, you're going to die here. I knew that was a fact. And I said it out loud. And I told the oncologist when he came in, I want to go home. He wanted to make sure I had care. I said, send me home. There'll be care. And I ended up with visiting nurses and all my 12-step fellowship friends. Feed me, change my diapers. Hospice was here waiting. I asked her what she was doing here, and she told me, well, you know, you're getting ready to die, and I sent her home. And I didn't believe that. And then I called my HIV guy. And during all of this, not one HIV doctor came into my life. During that entire it was cancer's first, we'll worry about HIV later. And yet when I finish the cancer treatment, I'm full-blown no immune system, destroyed by the HIV virus and the radiation and chemo. If I had caught a cold at that time, I'd have been dead. So something said, call your HIV doctor since no one's been in touch. I did. I told him what was going on. He said, we need to put you on combo drugs right today. Get someone to go to the pharmacy. I will prescribe, and he did. Up to this point in time, I had said no to AZT. And up to this point in time, I said no to combos based on, there was no proof yet that it was working. Well, then I needed it, and the proof was in my own recovery and beating HIV, beating full-blown AIDS and cancer. If it hadn't been for the combo drugs, that would not have been the case. And so I'm one of a few people in the world who beat full-blown AIDS too, not just HIV. Now I'm undetectable. 6 years after that, there was AZT in my combo. The AZT blew my heart vessels. Boys were starting to die now, not of AIDS. They were dying from old age diseases, heart disease, kidney disease, liver disease, pancreatic cancer, lung infections, and it was mostly linked to drugs. And the physicians and pharmacists didn't know this yet. We were all new to the therapies. This is what all us older guys we were the test people for these, whether it was going to succeed or not, whether you could get a long-term survivor because of combos. In the meanwhile, pharmaceutical companies are creating new combos. In case this one fails, they'll have this backup, and there'll be no going backwards, which was a really smart thing. I ended up switching some combos. But anyway, the AZT caused the heart thing. I had a heart attack. I went into denial first, indigestion. Drove myself to the emergency room, which they tell you never do. And I ended up staying a couple weeks, 2 different hospitals. And I had, first they put stents in. Then the stents 6 months later got clogged. Then they did the open heart 4-way bypass on my 64th birthday. I was not afraid during that entire thing. And I didn't want to drink. None of the things that had happened to me up at this point in time, since I got sober, did I have a thought, I think a drink will make this better. I cannot tell you why that happens, other than it has to be some sort of power outside of me. An alcoholic drinks, no matter what. I didn't want one. Never even crossed my mind. So, and I called a rehab to help me wean off morphine. I knew that was going to be an issue if I didn't have, join the team and say, I know the dangers of morphine. And the medical director at Father Martin's stepped me down over a period of 15 days, I think, here at my home. And it was hard. There was real withdrawal, the bedtime leg syndrome thing. Oh, that was the worst. And in the meantime, I'm trying to learn how to poop again and walk, and I'm being exercised by OT and PT therapists. I'm being monitored for the blood, for the labs, for the hydration. All of that's being done. And I think all of this happened over, my recovery happened over about an 8-month period. A few months into it, instead of dying, I went to my first 12-step fellowship meeting. This 12-step fellowship people came out here and brought meetings to my home. I had all of that. I had my family. I had visitors. Some I don't remember, and they told me they were there, but that's because of morphine. And the heart business was, I asked them not, the day they suggested open heart, it didn't dawn on me, it's the open heart where they reroute your blood and your lungs to machines, okay, and split you open. I didn't think that. But I was still under anesthesia for the test to discover that my stents had clogged. They had a 6 to 9 member heart team that was going to be the people to take care of me. They came in together to ask me and convince me to have open heart. One of them looked like Tom Selleck. I said, yes. What else would you do? If Tom Selleck is standing there telling you he'll cut you open. So, I said, only if he does the surgery. They roared. They got it. And my HIV status did turn out, not with these 9 people. They were extraordinary. My surgeon was divine. He saved my life. But the HIV and AIDS status didn't go over big with all of the medical staff on any of the floors or departments that I was in or would be in, recovery-wise or diagnostically. There were people who who had complete ignorance, and you could tell the hospital hadn't taught everybody that in the cardiac area anyway. Maybe they did in the others. And the staff only came in when they had to, some. Now, there were others who couldn't have cared less. But the staff that I noticed the most were the resistant, fearful-eyed, quick-answered, don't talk much, get out of the room as soon as you can kind of behaviors. And I had not experienced that except during the cancer. That was quite prevalent. They were bandaged, gloved, gowned, and face masked to God and back, as they probably should have been. But you could tell that same thing was going on there. Because I was medicated, I never took that on as an advocacy thing. Maybe I should have, I don't know. But I noticed it, that here it is, year 2006, the epidemic's been here since the 80s, and we still have ignorance and judgmentalism and what's the other thing? Fearful tagging of somebody who has HIV. So that kind of blew my mind away, but it wasn't my job to take that on and be change all of that.
Was it during this that your mom died?
Mother died before the cancer. She had COPD, severe COPD. She had stopped drinking, she had stopped smoking, she had was doing everything she could because she knew that disease was going to be a hell of a thing. But in the end, in a 20-day period of hospitalization, and they actually put the big thingy on her trach, which would have been permanent. She said, "Oh no, I want to die," and she did. She died 2 days later. She was very mad at my dad for making that decision to put that tube, permanent, breathe through the trachea thing. I was here. I was sharing or speaking at a 12-step meeting on a Sunday morning, and my sponsor came in, and she stayed until the end of the meeting, and then she took me aside and she said, "Your mom didn't make it." And unfortunately, of course I fell apart. I was a mess. But I had been home 2 weeks previous that and had spent time with Mom, and it was good time. I'm so glad I had that quality moment. So, and I missed her during the cancer. Dad came, but I missed her during the cancer. And my father was pretty fabulous about supporting me, long distance, as well as when I was going to be sent home and they said I was dying, he came here for 3 days, stocked my refrigerator. His health was failing. He had COPD too, but he lived another 17 years, I think, from that date, and both their passing was a natural rite of passage. I didn't want to drink, but it was also there was a lot of gratitude connected with who they were. It was revealed to me all the good things about them, and I've heard other people say that when their parents pass. I'm glad I experienced it that way, and anything that might have been negative was like just small potatoes. It really didn't matter. They did the best they could. And to know that, to have that come to me, gave me peace in my own life, that I'm doing the best I can, and that they did too, and boy, was I blessed. I was blessed to know those two people. So it had its natural sorrow and sadness and missing, but I came away with more of a miracle feeling during that experience, and I'm very, very grateful that it happened that way if they had to go. Then I got cancer. Dad died after my heart attacks and my heart surgeries. We need to talk about this. No sex life. Okay? Doesn't mean anybody has to do anything about it. We just need to talk about it. Who's getting tired? Not me. And it's their dinner time. I have a whole list of things, of losses and gains, based on everything up to this point in time. As a senior citizen, as a person getting older and who's gay. But the one thing that has jumped out at me is that all this time I have not had a date or a sexual experience. And then I was told by my physicians that I won't. Radiation blew everything up that supposed to work sexually. I kind of didn't know that until I started talking to Miss Pat about it. It bothered me, and I started to feel a sense of grief and loss, and I was different. I'm no longer gay. There's no hope. Suicidal thoughts started coming in. What's the purpose? I still have the infatuation and the being turned on by other men, either in person or in magazines or films. But I have no avenue to express that in any way, shape, or form. So I have to pray a lot about lust. Tamper the lust down. If anything gets me drunk today, it'll be the fact I'm not getting laid, and I have to really watch that. I had sexual promiscuity addiction too. I think so throughout my years, because my first sex experience happened drunk, and all of them since. So I think the two are very, very connected because they produce the same results, and I just can't get enough. Gotta have more. But today I miss Walt. I don't miss our troubles, or I know I'm not the one to be in his life. I introduced him to his lover, and he has a wonderful new lover. Been together 8 years, 6 years, but and he's 82 now. But as I finish these last years before I die, and I'm not alone. I've seen articles and heard interviews on TV of seniors like myself who either are long-term survivors of something. It may not be HIV or AIDS, and in my case it's 5 things, 6 things all in a row. Have that same feeling. I'm not alone, but there's no intimacy, that one-on-one intimacy and thoughtfulness and courtesy and sharing a funny story. For me, it doesn't even have to be sex, to be honest with you. But it's a huge loss, and it takes you out of the norm of social behaviors. Your other married friends don't hang around you. You're not invited like you used to be, or you're too sick, or you have no endurance for what it takes to get to the next event, or you have no money. There's many drag pageants I wanted to go to as a senior, even recently. I'd have loved to have seen this last Miss Maryland thing. I don't have the money for the gas to get down there. Now I don't have the car. I don't have any money, and I don't have the admission fee. I have no money to buy the Cokes. I have to get other things that have huge priorities. And thank God I have resources for that. But it's one of those things you don't think about often, of older guys having to be home more than they ever used to be. And maybe they got a friend or two, but it is not that big, all-encompassing of social life. And the young ones aren't running to us to talk to us about our experiences or embracing us to be a part of the experience that they're in, or to learn something from us. Or I have two married friends they're going to get married. Cutie pies, I love them. They're in our fellowship. Facebook, they show all the social things they do with a whole bunch of other youthful folks, but they don't invite me. Now, I couldn't go. Physically, I probably couldn't tolerate it. My God, they spent 3 days at Gay Pride. I could never have tolerated that, but I'd like to have been asked. I'd like to have that have been a thought. We miss Michael, kind of thing. And I found out I'm not the only guy who has had that experience. Now, I reconcile it. I get through the part that hurts, or that I let hurt me, and then I get to a space. It is what it is. Just don't make it any more important than that. But can I wish for it and dream for it? Yeah, I have a right to do that. And if God sees fit, I'm willing to wait. I don't know what He's got in store. Nothing is predictable now. I mean, I'm on my way to the casket, and I have no idea when that might happen or how much else I get to do between now and that point in time. That reality in itself is a huge alone, something you deal with alone inside your heart and your head. No one can. There's no textbook that tells you how to come to grips with it, even if it's natural and it's inevitable, and your whole life has been about being born on your way to your casket. That was a huge adjustment. And I had to talk to Miss Pat a lot about how that felt. It wasn't that it was knowledge, it was how I was reacting to it. And it made me feel, let it make me feel like I was less than, not worthy. And then if I'm not worthy, then I shouldn't have a lover. I shouldn't have good things. I shouldn't have a car. I shouldn't. It spills down to this cascade of negativism, which alcoholism wants and loves it when we're in that state, because it has its most influence, because the drink might sound good, and the health issues become either stay at a line of degradation, or you don't get any better. Excuse me, and you start getting worse from something that you kind of reached a plateau on because of how you're feeling and thinking, and that hurts. That hurts me the most, and it hurts me when I hear it in others, other men my age. There's no group of us. There's no long-term survivors getting together on Friday nights and square dancing, even in our wheelchairs.
Why not?
Exactly. Why not? So